Senator Bernie Sanders is an independent Vermont. He caucuses with the Democrats. Graham Plattner is Democratic candidate for the Senate from Maine. They have been out together as part of the Fighting Oligarchy tour. They have an event tonight after our show. It's good to see you both, gentlemen. Mr. Plattner, let me just start with you. Today, of course, is Memorial Day. People are observing. There's people barbecuing, and there's people commemorating folks and thinking about what this day means. And obviously, someone who's served multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, someone who's spoken incredibly movingly, I have to say, just personally, very movingly about your experience of that, of being in those wars, just how you're feeling and what you're thinking about today on this Memorial Day.
Yeah, well, thanks for having us, Chris. And this morning, actually, Senator Sanders was gracious enough to honor the town of Sullivan, Maine, which is my hometown, to join us at our Memorial Day event. Memorial Day is always a complicated day, I think, for those of us who saw a lot of combat. It's a day where we want to remember, and we need to not forget those who made the ultimate sacrifice. But as you mentioned, it's also a day which a lot of people in our society treat as like a holiday. And that's always a little complicated, I think, for those of us who remember our friends who we lost. It's also, quite frankly, at this day and age, a reminder that the best way for us to honor those who have sacrificed for this country is to not create more opportunities for government to waste people's lives like we are seeing in the war in Iran. I very much believe that we need to take moments like today and realize that we have a resource in this country, and the young men and women who are willing to serve it, and it cannot be squandered lightly. And I very much believe that we need to build a politics in the future that takes it seriously enough to not start wars like Iraq or Afghanistan or what's happening in Iran, and realize that the best respect that we can show is by only using it in times when absolutely necessary.
Senator, you've spent a lot of time on the Veterans Committee in the United States Senate, and Veterans Services and healthcare has been an issue that has been very, very front and center for your career in the legislature, both in the House and the Senate. Your thoughts, particularly as we get some news that maybe or maybe there isn't a deal to end the kind of frozen conflict with Iran right now?
Well, certainly, I hope that there will be. The problem is we have a president who lies all of the time, and it's hard to know what is true and what is not true. But, you know, going back to what Graham just said, I am thinking about my generation, where we experienced the war in Vietnam. 59,000 plus young men died. Many more died after they came home on the streets, the drug addiction and et cetera. And that was a war based on a lie, as was the war in Iraq. And we need a foreign policy which is designed to improve life for people all over the world, to do our best to make sure that we do not have these never-ending wars that we're now seeing in Iran, and which honors and respects the men and women who are prepared to sacrifice their lives to make sure that they do not have to put their lives on the line in wars that should not be fought.
The title for the event, the tour, Senator Sanders, that you've been on, called a Fighting Oligarchy tour. This is one of those stops. I think one of the people I think that you would consider an oligarch, and I think probably fits the textbook definition, would be Jeff Bezos. Of course, you know, one or two richest men in the world, depending on what the stock is doing that day. And there's been an interesting debate that's opened up about taxes, about tax fairness. Particularly different Democrats have had different proposals about tax fairness. And I want to play something he said about his own tax verdict and get your response, Mr. Plattner, and yours, Senator Sanders. This is what he had to say about the idea of doubling his taxes and that it wouldn't really help very much. Take a listen.
If people want me to pay more billions,
right,
then let's have that debate. But don't pretend, you know, that's going to solve the problem. You could double the taxes I pay, and it's not going to help that teacher in Queens. I promise you.
Mr. Plattner, what do you think of that?
Oh, I think it's abject nonsense. I think that's what somebody says when they don't want to see their taxes go up. There's absolutely no question that if we target the wealth where it has been hoarded frankly, for decades at this point, and we pull it back into our system and put it into social programs like healthcare, like childcare, like paying teachers what they are worth, we will absolutely improve the lives of working Americans and, quite frankly, improve our society as a whole. It's, I think what he is pitching is propaganda. It's meant to protect himself and protect his crony friends. And we're going to come after them for it.
Senator, he also pivoted to an idea of like cutting taxes. No one in the bottom 50% would pay any taxes. There's been a lot of Democrats, interestingly, proposing things along that line, big exemptions at the bottom. I think Senator Booker has a version, Senator Van Hollen. People, I think, who talk about this progressive. Congresswoman AOC has come out against it, saying, look, the best way that we build a kind of society and tax system that works for all is that everyone's paying in and everyone's benefiting, more like what we see around Social Security, Medicare, more what we see in Europe. Where are you on that?
Well, what I know is that today we have more income and wealth inequality than we have ever had in the history of this country, much worse than the so-called Gilded Age. And I know that at a time when the top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 93%, when people like Bezos and Musk own more wealth than, so many Americans combined. Musk himself owns more wealth than the bottom 53% of American households. Meanwhile, the effective tax rate of billionaires is lower than that of a nurse or a truck driver. So, of course, we need to demand that the wealthiest people in this country, the billionaire class, start paying their fair share of taxes, which is why I've introduced legislation calling for a 5% annual tax on the wealth of billionaires. That's less than 1,000 Americans. And, Chris, if we do that, we raise enough revenue to provide a $3,000 check for every man, woman, and child in families under 150,000. We can make sure that everybody who was thrown off of health care by Trump gets reinstated. And we can do enormous things for the American people. The point is, there is so much inequality right now that taxes on billionaires can transform life for the working class of this country, which is right now struggling to pay the bills.
Mr. Plattner, you're trying to make the case to the folks in your home state of Maine to vote out a five-term incumbent, someone who's been a real, I think it's fair to say, an institution in Maine life, and comes from a sort of political family and has been there for a very long time, probably has name recognition north of 99%, I think it's fair to say, in Maine, who has beaten back other challenges. Why do you think, what is different this time? What is the case for why Mainers should turn away from someone who has been such an institution in that state through Democratic and Republican institutions?
Well, I mean, quite frankly, because as an institution, she has overseen the deterioration of material conditions for working people in this state. I mean, where we are today is worse than where we were when she entered the Senate. We have fewer hospitals. We have fewer schools. Housing has become an abject nightmare for younger people in the state, and elderly for that matter. We have seen people living on fixed incomes see their benefits continue to stay small while the price of everything else goes up. She has been in the U.S. Senate through all of this. And more importantly, she has votes on her record time and time again that show that she is not willing to go out of her way to either stand up to Donald Trump, stand up to the Republican Party, or stand up on behalf of the working people in her state. She had a charade for a long time that she was an independent. I think that charade is very much come to an end because of the reality that we're living in. But it's not going to keep the people that support her from dumping in as much money as they possibly can. The billionaire backers of Susan Collins, they know the stakes of this race. Any road to a Democratic Senate goes through the state of Maine. They're spending accordingly. And I will say for those watching, if you want to help out, grantforsenate.com. We can really use it.
Senator, your thoughts as someone who's known and worked with, I mean, obviously across the aisle, but you're one state over. You've known Susan Collins for a long time. What do you think about Mr. Plattner's chances?
Well, I think Graham is going to win. And I think he is going to win because the people in Maine, the people in Vermont, people all over this country understand that right now the economy is totally rigged. So what's going on right now? People on top have never, ever had it so good. while working families struggle, or elderly people can't afford their prescription drugs, while young people, everything being equal, will have a lower standard of living than their parents. So what kind of economy is that? And the people also understand, as Graham just said, that the political system, campaign finance, totally rigged. Does anybody in their right mind think that it's a good idea for our democracy that billionaires can pour unbelievable amounts of money to defeat candidates like Graham or other progressive candidates around the country? That's a corrupt campaign finance system. And nibbling around the edges and establishment politics and a little bit of this and a little bit of that, we're beyond that right now. The system is broken. The system is corrupt. The system is dominated by the billionaire class. People want real change in Maine, in Vermont, and all over this country. That is why Graham is going to win.
You know, I saw an article yesterday. We were starting to get some of the money filings for these independent expenditures, right? Who are the biggest donors in this cycle? Mark Andreessen, who's a big right-wing tech guy who is one of the most sort of like zealous boosters of AI and right-wing politics, and says things on podcasts like no one should ever engage in self-reflection. It's an actual thing he said. It's a real quote. He's actually the #1 donor in this cycle so far. I think it's $115 million he's given so far. And Senator Sanders, the last thing for you, because you've been spending some time talking and thinking about AI in ways I found interesting. I've watched some of your videos. I've listened to some of what you said. The Pope, first American Pope Leo, had a very interesting address on AI, sort of talking about the possibility and the peril of it, and comparing it to the threat of a biblical Tower of Babel. How do you think about that interest as it sort of lingers and over this campaign?
I think it's a huge issue. I think every American should be thinking, what does it mean when the very wealthiest people in this country, Musk, Bezos, Zuckerberg, Ellison, and others, are spending hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars to develop and implement AI and robotics? What does it mean when Jeff Bezos is putting together a $100 billion fund to, quote unquote, automate factories? What it means is that tens of millions of jobs in the next decade will likely be disappearing. And what happens to the working class of this country then? What it also means is that we have to worry about our politics, putting stuff on television where people, or on social media, people will not know the difference between what's true and what is made up and false. We got to worry about the existential threat, Chris, because scientists tell us that as AI becomes smarter than human beings, it can become independent of human control with potentially catastrophic results. It is a huge issue. And the billionaires and big tech say, hey, we don't want any regulation. And Trump says, we don't want any regulation. Let us do whatever we want. To hell with what happens. Well, I think the American people disagree. It's an issue of great importance in this campaign.
In fact, final little note is that last week they're going to put out their first ever regulation on it, which is going to be voluntary. And the president's #1 AI man, David Sachs, called him at the last minute because industry didn't want it, and they canceled it. Lo and behold, so that did not get issued.
Musk did as well.
Yes. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, Maine Senate candidate Graham Plattner here on this Memorial Day, and they will be doing that rally later today. I appreciate you gentlemen making time for us on this day.